from the towering shelves of Toys R Us to the treasure troves of the mom and pop shops. In the excitement of browsing through the racks at Blockbuster Video, every store had its own unique charm and allure. Well, join me as we reminisce about the sights, sounds, and sheer joy of exploring these gaming havens. What's going on, everyone? I'm RussLyman, and this is Rob.
Can't wait to dive into this topic of these stores of the past.
I know, there's so many great ones to talk about, so let's get into our topic.
Gaming stores of the past.
Tuesday.
Now, there certainly were plenty of options to go to stores and get video games back in the day, but one that kind of stands out in my mind is rent-to-own stores, like these rent-a-centers.
What the heck is a rent-to-own store?
It's a store you would go in and pay monthly on an item until you paid it off. You actually end up paying more for that item, but if you only want to pay 30 bucks a month, it's an easy way to get a new TV or couch. But here's a story on that. I remember going in there with my dad. You know, he was probably browsing for maybe a new TV or couch or something like that. But I remember them having a small section with Nintendo games. And, you know, you can browse the back of the box and see the gameplay on there. Look at the box art. And I just thought it was so odd. Kind of back in the 80s, early 90s, a lot of stores wanted to jump on these rental of NES games because it was so big. They're like, we want to get in on that. So I thought it was kind of neat to be in a rental store and you're like, okay, I guess if you made sense, right? If you're buying a new TV and you got a Nintendo Entertainment System, you're gonna need some games to play.
It seemed like everyone wanted in on selling video games.
You are certainly right, Rob, and that brings me to my next choice on the list here, and that is Stop and Shop, or grocery stores in general if you didn't have a Stop and Shop in your area. I certainly would remember going there on a Friday or Saturday night, and of course parents are gonna go shopping, but they had this small video section that you can wander into in the front of the store, kind of near the checkout area. And of course they had movies, VHS tapes and all that, but they also had video games, so you could rent a game for the weekend. And I remember getting these cases in. I used to work at a retro video game store and people would trade in stuff there, and I remember the cases saying Stop and Shop, you know, a 3-day rental or whatever. And again, I just loved looking at these games. A lot of times my dad would just drop me off there while he went grocery shopping because I didn't want to go up and down the aisles looking at food. I wanted to look at video games. What are the new Nintendo games that the grocery store had in stock? And again, hit or miss, because which ones were rented out. You know, maybe you were looking for Mega Man or Simon's Quest. You were playing it last week. You wanted to rent it again, and it was out. So they had a small section of video games, and you had to choose one for the weekend, and hopefully you chose right.
Clean up on aisle nostalgia.
And of course, I have to mention the mom and pop shops out there renting and selling video games. There certainly was a ton, so I can't distinctly remember one store that I went to, but just to discuss them in general. Again, with my experience, I grew up and my parents were divorced, so on weekends I would go visit my dad. So I'd get dropped off and dad would bring me to a video rental store. He would get a movie, usually a horror movie, and I would pick out, well, a Nintendo game. For the most part, I don't think I was renting Sega because I had my Nintendo at his house. So we were getting an NES game for the weekend, and I definitely remember browsing the shelves, the wire racks that they had with these cover arts, and even sometimes, it's sad to look at now, but they would have these hanging on the shelf here. Here's Friday the 13th that is laminated, and it has that rental price right in there at 10 bucks. You get the back cover as well, so it's this way easier to flip through what games you wanted to rent for the weekend. Now, this actually came from a local store called Video 7, which I'm probably showing some B-roll footage of. I am working on a video of me going there. I went there quite some time ago. So much footage to go through, and I love to make a great video for you guys, so I'm taking my time on it. So subscribe if you're not already so you don't miss that awesome video when it comes out.
You won't want to miss this or the new list videos we do every week. On to the next store.
So I had two big box stores near me that I would go to check out new video games. First one being Sears. Now, I have a fun little story that I put together for my buddy 8-Bit Glitch 79 back when he was doing a Christmas special. I want to show you guys that clip. So there is snow on the ground even though we're not in winter, but it's a great story. Alright guys, we are headed to a place that definitely makes me feel nostalgic. I don't know if you guys have the same feeling attached to a place rather than a video game or something like that, a toy in your collection. I have a physical place that when I see it, just brings me back. So this just looks like a regular door right here, security door. But that wasn't always the case. So the door behind me used to be accessible when this was a Sears. It is now a Burlington Coat Factory, but back in the day it was a Sears. And through that door led to the small video game section that they had. And they had a kiosk there where you could try out the games. I remember so much coming here and playing those games. It's not too far from where I live, so we were able to walk here, me and my friends, and try out whatever games they had in the kiosk, Super Nintendo kiosk, you know, Super Mario World, Street Fighter, and then not too far from here, right across the way back here, was another store called Service Merchandise. Again, one of those retro stores that are no longer around, unfortunately, but they too had video games in there and a kiosk, and I remember plenty of times playing Super Mario World on their kiosks. You know, we were young kids and we couldn't afford video games. Maybe we only got them for our birthday or Christmas. So to try out a new game was awesome in this store. And, you know, being close to where I lived, I was able to, again, walk there, ride my bike, and go play some Super Nintendo until one of the kids on the street got the game. But every time I pass by these buildings, I always kind of think of those memories, Service Merchandise, and returning to Sears here to play some video games. And yeah, definitely loved walking to Sears. It brings me to my next one, which was the other big box store right next to that, was Service Merchandise. If you guys remember this store, very similar to Sears, you know, they had their kiosk there as well, where you can try out the new games. I remember playing Super Mario World there, of course. A lot of the stuff was behind glass cases, and their whole thing was, I believe you filled out like a piece of paper, right? So then when you went to check out, their thing was they had a conveyor belt on the back of the store, and you would wait for your item to come down that conveyor belt. So exciting, you're just waiting, eyes glued to see your Nintendo game or system even come down that conveyor belt, and you were ready to go home and play that game and enjoy it. Of course, they had catalogs as well that you can go through and see what's coming up, like these Christmas wish books. Service Merchandise store forgotten to the past.
What if I wanted to get my toy fix and video games at one spot?
Oh, that's a great question, Rob. That brings me to my next pick, KB Toys. I definitely remember walking in the mall and seeing KB Toys and all the like neon signs. They had the World of Nintendo showcase. Everything just drew you into that store as a kid. You wanted to run in there and check out what toys they had, but also what video games, and a fair selection indeed that they had. Loved going in there, browsing around, you know, trying to get your parents to bring you to KB Toys while you're at the mall. Maybe they're clothes shopping or something else, and they knew if they went into that store, they'd be stuck there for quite some time.
I bet they had a lot of cool robots in that store.
Oh yeah, totally, Rod. They had Rock'em Sock'em robots. They probably had a few remote control ones, and I'm sure they sold a bunch of your brothers and cousins there.
Cousin Tony, he still owes me 5 bolts.
Alright, well, I asked you guys what stores you used to shop at back in the day for video games. Let's check out what you said. Mike73X99 says, back in the day, KB, Bradley's, and Toys R Us. Then all the mom and pop stores. Will Knox says, Record Town, which FYE bought out, I think. KB, Funkoland, and Toys R Us. Jeffrey says, mostly Child World, KB, and Funkoland, but also sometimes use mail order. Miggy Miesta says, usually Target or Funkoland. Ben Waterfowl says, local video store and KB's. Retro Cart Collector says, most of my video games came at Christmas through the Sears Christmas Wish Book. I would spend hours and hours looking at the games in those books leading up to Christmas morning, just hoping I would get one or two under the tree. I remember circling Chrono Trigger in a wish book and being so excited when I got it. Great memory. Steve V's Man Cave Arcade says Walmart was the main spot I would get video games back in the day. Also, EB Games, which was GameStop in Canada. I didn't know that. There was a flea mart that would happen every Sunday in my town that we would go to back in the mid to late 90s that had some video games for sale. Atari, NES, SNES, Sega, Game Boy, etc. Got so many great deals on some classic games I still own today. Richard Mincy says, back when the original Xbox was phasing out, I used to get my mom to pick me up old Xbox rental games from Hollywood Video. That's how I found out about Time Splitters, Future Perfect, and Gladius. I also used to go to Rhino Video Games and pick up old Dreamcast games before they got bought out by GameStop. DJ Python Sectotic says, little family-owned video stores. When NES games were being replaced with new, the older would be marked down to dirt cheap. Keep an eye out at flea markets and yard sales. But word of mouth that you're the video game guy is always the best deals. Back in the day, that is. Nowadays, good luck. And finally, Plurge and Splurge Thrifting says, the nostalgia vibes right now. Take me back. I definitely scored a lot of my retro games on the cheap from Blockbuster Video with birthday or allowance money. I remember scoring Pocky and Rocky for Super NES, complete in box for $6.99 way back in the mid to late 90s. I'd say I also got a fair share from local department stores where I lived in eastern central Massachusetts, like Ames, Caldors, and Child World, to name a few. Unfortunately, those last three went belly up by the mid to late 90s where I lived, so Toys R Us and KB were the only other options until they also went out of business. As a kid, nothing was more satisfying than going to the store to pick out a Nintendo game. Take it back home to play it, that was all mine. I didn't have to rent or borrow it or return it. Simple, but amazing times. Man, that certainly brought back a lot of memories of shopping for games. And speaking of shopping, if you guys want to support the show, I just got this new t-shirt in. It's a play off of Play It Loud, the Game Boy design. You can purchase it with the link in the description down below or on screen.
These shirts look real sweet. Check out our other designs too. Receiving transmission. Receiving transmission.
Oh, looks like we have another submission. Hopefully we get a great story.
One thing that people may not realize or appreciate about the retail shopping experience is that whenever I would go to the store or a customer would go to the store, you would go looking for a particular item, but one of the things that's fun is just browsing. In fact, I think that's one of the things that we love about conventions is going and browsing and just seeing what's there and being surprised and going, oh, I want to get that. When you have online shopping, the main important thing about online shopping is convenience. I don't have to drive to the store, look around, be disappointed if it's not there, which to be fair was kind of a frustrating experience, especially for a very popular item that was sold out. But there's something about going and just looking around, especially at old game stores, because the inventory was so hard to predict. And so at the time, Games for Less in Fullerton, California, one of my favorite local stores, they were my go-to spot for boxed and sealed Nintendo 64 games. Now, about 10 or so years ago, even before that, when I would go, $19.99 was the cost of a brand new sealed Nintendo 64 game. You wouldn't expect to pay too much more than that for Nintendo 64 games in box. I mean, they had sealed copies of Rayman 2, sealed copies of, Starshot, Space Circus, Fever, Tonic Trouble, games I wish I back then would have spent $20 on, but here we are. Nonetheless, one of the things that I loved about Games for Less was their store was humongous and there was inventory everywhere. It was, it's hard to explain the massive sort of size of the store, and then there was a whole back room as well. At that time, I would go and I would just maybe once every month or two treat myself to a boxed Nintendo 64 game, sealed or in box. I'll show you a couple of those right now. The first one is this. They had piles of Ready to Rumble boxing just sitting behind the counter, and these were $20 at the time, and I asked them, would you do 2 for $30, and they did. You can still see the Games for Less sticker right there at the top, and here at the bottom too, just the generic sticker. I'll probably never open these because playing these games is best on the Sega Dreamcast, not on the Nintendo 64, And there is something that, makes my heart happy to see these games in box with that Games for Less sticker. And this isn't one of those, gotta grade them kind of games. So it's kind of in that weird spot where I don't really want to sell them. The sticker here is more valuable to me than anything else. The other one is this game, Rocket Robot on Wheels. Now there's an unfortunate dirt stain here, but at the time, this was, I think, about $45 complete in box. And I remember thinking, oh, that's just really expensive. I don't know if I want to get that. But I hadn't seen Rocket Robot on Wheels anywhere, complete in box, new, or anything. And it was at a time when I was really starting to get into collecting for the Nintendo 64 library beyond what I got during the console's original release cycle. So I thought, you know what, I'll get it. It's more than I normally would spend, but I don't really see this game ever. And truthfully, since that time, I have not found this game anywhere complete in box, new, sealed, anything. Even at conventions, maybe every once in a while you might see one of these pop up, but nothing comes to mind of being able to see it. I've seen Clay Fighter Sculptor's Cut more at conventions than I have Rocket Robot on Wheels. It's a great platforming game. Many would say it's one of the hidden gem games on the Nintendo 64. Maybe one day I'll be able to upgrade this box into one that's slightly cleaner, but truthfully, other than the dirt stain, it's in pretty good shape overall, and I'm quite happy with being able to have this one in the box. Those are some of my memories from Games for Less in Fullerton, California. They also had a Santa Ana, California location. Love to go there, and thanks, Russ, for having me be a part of the channel. I am thrilled to be on it, and I'm stumbling over my words. Going this way.
Wow, I just love stories like that. Thanks so much for sharing with us, Mort.
Okay, now on to our top 3 stores.
And coming in at number 3... Number 3! Going to Funkoland was such a core memory growing up, for sure. I love that they had little stations set up so you can try the game out in store instead of just relying on what the back of the box said or looked like with the gameplay footage that they showed. Sometimes you're like, I don't know how this game would play. So they give you, 5 or 10 minutes to give it a go, and then you can purchase it if you want. I do still have some of these cool Funkoland dust sleeves that came in different colors, which is really nostalgia. I'm glad I got these. These are cardboard, so sometimes you see these at eBay auctions or maybe at game conventions. Red, yellow, orange, green, and we also got a blue one as well. But the one thing everyone remembers, the Funkoland price sheet. They would send these out in the mail, and you can see what games that they had and what they were paying for them or how much they cost, essentially. And I remember taking these with my friends and circling a whole bunch of the games. A lot of times we would circle all the cheap games because obviously we didn't have a lot of money. So it's like, all right, I got $10. What games could I get from Funkoland?
Value of trade-in varied between 10 cents and $55. Funkoland changed the offered prices for games twice a month, much like the stock market does for commodities.
So this one that I have is from March 1995.
I wonder how much I was worth to Funkoland.
Oh, good question, Rob. Let's see if you're in here. Fortunately, mine doesn't show it here. It does say the Nintendo deck was going for $20, and they list a few other things on here, but no Rob the Robot. Game Genie's on here. A light gun was $1.49. The Power Glove, $13.99 for the Power Glove. Power Pad was only $4.99. These prices. So I don't know how much you cost, Rob, back then. Maybe they weren't taking trade-ins for Rob the Robots, unfortunately.
I don't know if I should be offended or not. Their loss, I guess.
Number 2! And of course we have to mention the big rental stores of the 80s and 90s. Blockbuster Video. I'm also talk about a little bit. Tommy K's is a local rental store here in Connecticut. But these were the places you would go to renting the games for the weekend and perhaps purchasing them. You guys already touched on it before, but when they're trying to get new stock of games to rent, maybe the new system came out, they would sell the older games. They would have a used section in the store, so maybe you could get some Nintendo games for cheap. I remember getting a lot of N64 games at Blockbuster Video and some disc-based games as well, like PlayStation 1 games, because they had PS2 out by then, so they're kind of dumping the old stuff. But certainly a good motto where you can rent the game for the weekend, see if you liked it, and then maybe purchase it for full price or put it on your Christmas wish list. That's the game I wanted to receive. And I definitely remember going to a ton of those and buying games, renting games, and it was a great time for sure.
The company expanded internationally throughout the 90s. At its peak in 2004, Blockbuster employed 84,300 people worldwide and operated 9,094 stores. I wonder how many of you still have rentals out.
Oh yeah, your late fees are gonna be absurd.
Moving on to our number one. Please, at no surprise.
Number 1! Of course it has to be a Toys R Us for shopping for video games, or heck, any nostalgia toy. This was the place to be. I remember going into Toys R Us and seeing the aisles of games, not just one section. You know, they had a full section for Nintendo, for Sega, Atari stuff, and I distinctly remember going there with my dad to purchase my last Atari 2600 games. I got the game Kangaroo, which I talked about on the show before, and Battlezone as well. I got those new at Toys R Us. That was kind of right before maybe I got a Nintendo, and I had my hand-me-down Atari from my cousin, so I remember purchasing those games. But I do remember going there as well, getting Nintendo games, and I remember getting a Game Boy game, Darkwing Duck, on the Game Boy. Got the game, I played it for the weekend, and I had beaten it so fast. Me and my dad tried to go back to Toys R Us and said, I got the game for my birthday, and I had already had it, but they wouldn't let us do a swap out of the game. They're like, if it doesn't work, we could give you the same game again. So we were trying to be tricky, and Toys R Us said no.
In December 2013, 8 days before Christmas, Toys R Us announced their stores in the United States would stay open for 87 hours straight. The flagship store of the retailer in Times Square was open 24 hours a day from December 1st to the 24th to cater to tourists.
But the nostalgia going onto that wall and picking up the slips of what game you wanted, make sure it had a slip. Maybe you wanted Super Mario 3, out of slips. They were out of stock. Devastated. But you grab your slip, go up, and then they go to the little cage area to get your video game, and you were good to go to play some awesome retro nostalgia games. Nostalgia now, they were new back then, but... Wow, and that was great talking about all those awesome stores that we would go to get retro video games.
I just wish some of those were still around.
Well, there still is the last Blockbuster video in Bend, Oregon you can visit. And of course you have local shops that you can go to that try to give you that nostalgia feeling.
Ooh, that nostalgia feeling. I just love it.
Okay guys, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks so much for watching to the end of the video. Please subscribe or hit the thumbs up button. It really helps out these videos.
Every time you hit the thumbs up button, I get closer to getting paid.
And if you guys want to dive more into my collection of retro games, here's a video checking out my most expensive NES games. Check that one out and let me know. As always guys, I'm RussLyman, and keep your world fun bit by bit. I'll see you next video.